wanted to make this video for a long time, but I didn't have the rifle to make the video, so finally a Remington 722 showed up at a decent price. And you probably know the 722 and the 721. And I have to say, I learned a lot making these videos, you know, as a collector, especially the way I collect, which is not really focused collection. I'm interested in all firearms and a whole bunch of other things. I don't always know everything I should know, so I looked up the 722 because I thought maybe you would want to know when they started making the Remington 722. And I thought it was in the 60s, but no, 1948 was when they started making the 722. And this is the 722. I'll just show you the action first. And the reason I'm holding it funny is I disassembled this rifle. I'm just holding it together. So then you may wonder, well, what year was this rifle made? And it doesn't look new for sure. There's some speckling on it, but I like it the way it is. It handles fine. The stock design is good. It's a very plain stock. This was made in April 1948, which was the year that the 722 was introduced. And if you're wondering about the cartridge, it's in this fabulous 300 Savage, which is very similar to the 308. And I read probably the same things you did, that the 308 was based on the 300 Savage. Anyway, before my hand gets a cramp, here's how simple this rifle is. That's the floor plate. It's a stamped piece of sheet metal. It's retained by 3 screws, and it still had slotted screws. And this is just for the trigger. This is the follower and spring. So when you take this out or off, that falls out. And then you have the stock, which has no checkering, has a typical aluminum butt plate. When you read about the 722, which is the short action, and the 721, which is the long action, the gun writers say things like a plain Jane gun. I guess it is. It has a rear sight that's dovetailed into the barrel. It's kind of got a island here like the pre-64 Model 70, and then a typical ramp front sight. And again, it's in that excellent 300 Savage. So then you remove the action. Magazine box is still in there. I could shake it out, but it doesn't matter. I don't see any glass. Nobody's messed with this gun. It may not be in perfect condition, but I prefer a rifle that's just been left the way it is. And all this pillar bedding and all this other stuff, this rifle shoots perfectly well just the way it is. So here you have the guts of the 722. Actually, the bolt handle, I think, is probably nicer than the 700. And this is all part of a story which will end with this rifle. But you can see it's a short, excellent, easy to make action. And this is the much talked about beginning of the trigger, which turned into a huge thing for Remington, with all kinds of problems and so on. But I've never had a problem, and people write me about these 700 triggers and 722. I think you can get any trigger to malfunction, and you can manipulate any mechanism in such a way that it functions in a different way from that which was intended. But if you just use a chainsaw, a lawnmower, or a rifle the way it's supposed to be used, generally speaking, it works. And I don't want to take away anything from people that had troubles. And I hope that all worked out for everybody without a tragedy. But anyway, that's a lot of talking. So barrel threaded in. We've got the recoil lug that's actually quite intelligently done, and it's still part of the action. And you can see the action is properly scaled. And even though this bolt shows use, which gives it, to me, character, it's still very slick. I mean, in a lot of ways. if you're not getting a Mauser, no wonder Remington has sold millions of these actions. They made 722, 721, 725, and then 700, and that series has gone into every kind of complexity. But you can see the magazine is just tubular steel, very easy to make, and then, you know, mill out all of the features that you need. But very straightforward. And like I said, I was surprised it was 1948. They realized that they can't make this style of action. Now Remington did not make this action, and they didn't offer a sporting Mauser 98. This is actually a Siamese Mauser, but you get the idea. Look how complex this action is. You've got all kinds of milling going on, all kinds of shapes. Now, of course, this has provisions for a stripper clip, but you can see that this has a lot more going on than this 722. But as plain as this rifle was, I'll turn it this way as well, it was the beginning of kind of an amazing adventure for the 700 series, because this plain rifle turned into this. And I'll try to hold the action so you can see the heritage. There's the 722, and below it is the 700. Now this is the short action, like I said, so that would be for 308, 243. I actually noticed when I was looking up the data manufacturer for this one that they made the 257 Roberts in the short action, which is kind of interesting because the 257 Roberts is based on the 7mm Mauser, the 7x57 Mauser. I thought it might be in the longer action, but somehow they fit it in there. I don't know whether they opened the action up. For fun, I pulled out the Tikka T3. This is what most people these days are used to buying. And you can see the length of this action and this rifle. This is not a factory bolt handle here. I put this on just for fun. And but look at the length of this action, and you know what caliber this is? It's 223. And the Tikka, they make one action, like one size fits all. But Sako makes different sizes of action, so it's the same company. Maybe they want you to buy the higher end model. Anyway, I always thought that's interesting, the size of that action for the tiny 223. But anyway, getting back to the subject, here's the 700. This is the BDL, and you'll probably want to know the differences. So they upgraded everything. They decided that they can, since the action and the rifle, the 722 and the 721, were such an immense success, and the profit margins were good, they realized they can offer more of a good-looking rifle. Now, it didn't turn into the 700 overnight, which came out in the early 60s, but they upgraded the floor plate, which I've taken the screws out. Now these are held on by Allen bolts, but you get now ironically this is aluminum, and it has the magazine box and the spring follower and everything is there, but it's, like I said, it's all aluminum, and this is it's just a stamp piece of sheet metal, but it's still steel. In other words, the magnet doesn't stick to this one, but it works great. And here's the action sort of stripped down, and now you can see very clearly that these essentially are the same gun. They're separated by whatever. This is a 2017, so lots of years between them. But this basic adaptation of the Mauser system has lasted, and for all their trigger problems or whatever's gone on with them, they remain in production. They've passed mil spec. I mean, these are amazingly fine rifles. I think we take them for granted, actually. And then they upgraded the stock. So I mean, from this, which looks like for an air rifle, to this, and you can go out and buy this. I don't know what they cost now. $800, maybe $1,000, I don't know, but whatever. And this one also not messed with. You know, people buy new rifles and they start messing with them right away. I know a lot of guys, with all respect, and I like tinkering too, but they glass bed and they drill holes and pillar bed, or send it to somebody else who does. They start messing with the trigger. Maybe I'm simple-minded, but these rifles come from the factory and I've never really had to change anything. Once in a while somebody sells me a synthetic stock, so I try that for a while, but I always go back to the wood. I don't know, just something about the way I think, I suppose. But there it is. That's the 700 BDL, which you can go and buy tomorrow if you want, which I think we're lucky to be able to do. And made in the USA, not made someplace else. And they started with this simple idea. I guess they had to see whether this would catch on with the public. And they knew they had to do something because they couldn't make their rifles. I showed you a Model 30 Remington, which is the Enfield action. They couldn't go on making those, which are essentially as complicated as the Mauser 98. So we're lucky enough to have the 700, and you can see the bolt handle is different. The safety obviously by now is perfected, and it's not a simple Mauser, safety and trigger. The action itself still tubular, still very easy to manufacture. It's very rigid. They talk a lot about the 3 rings of steel in the bolt face, which is 2 locking lugs, which is probably worth mentioning. The base of the cartridge is surrounded by the bolt face, so that if there is a rupture, it really doesn't amount to much. And there have been all kinds of things, you know, with hand loads and whatnot that I've seen on the range where cartridges rupture and the people just open their Model 700 or 722. This one is popular for target shooting. Still, they rebarrel them. And I've seen some of these in 222 that shoot like a house on fire, like just unbelievable. It's hard to tell whether that's superior to this. I don't think so. I think they just go to great lengths and have a lot of attention to detail. Anyway, that's a lot of talking, but great rifles. For all of you that wrote me to show the 2 rifles, the 2 actions. Sorry I don't have 721s, but you can use your imagination. The 721 is a long version of this, and I've had them in all kinds of calibers, and they're excellent too. But there's something about the 722, I don't know, the rigidity of it and the simplicity of it. It's just a super clean action, and everybody that followed copies more or less the simplifications that Remington came up with way back in 1948. So I consider it a brilliant action that, like I said, people take for granted because we're comfortable, we're used to seeing it. But when it disappears from the catalog one day, we'll probably realize how great the rifle was. So I think that probably fairly covers everything. You can see some jeweling happening here. No surprises. Countless aftermarket parts for this and stocks, and you buy one of these 700s, you can emerge with a gun that looks like an Accuracy International or a rail gun or anything you want. There's just about everything for the 700. I'm probably missing things, I always do, but there it is. I hope that does some kind of justice to it. Incredibly fine rifle, and thank you for watching. We're still struggling with Patreon, so hopefully you can join me there, and Instagram as well. And thanks for your patience with me, and we'll see you on the next video. Take care.